Today, earlier on, we were discussing at the Legatum Institute what it means to be a Conservative and how, as a Conservative, you should restore prosperity. And it's basically about going back to first principles. Conservatives believe in the individual as opposed to the collective. That is to say, the idea that power, authority, prosperity comes from the actions of individuals coming together and doing things through their family, then through a community, then to the state, creating an overall society. This is in contradistinction to the socialist who believes that the collective is what you should worry about and that the collective as a whole can have the individual fit in with what it sees as being best for the collective. Now, we have built up a constitution, to my mind, based on conservative principles of freedom. You see them in the Magna Carta. You see them in the 1297 Act of Tallage. You see them in the Bill of Rights, that we are a society that has put the state under the law rather than having the state as above the law, which is very much more the constitutional model on the continent. So, John Fortescue in the 15th century was able to say that the King of England was under the law, whereas the King of France was the law. And you see this in later centuries with Louis XIV, able to say, the state is me. And you continue to see it in our different constitution practices today. What are the pillars of our constitution? Well, they're fourfold. They are democracy, and a democracy of great antiquity. The right of Parliament to vote on taxation dates back to 1297. The rule of law. That's not the same as the rule of lawyers, but it is the common law and the law passed by Parliament. The rights of property. Your property can only be taken from you by a proper process, and taxation, which is confiscation of property, again requires Parliament. And the freedom of speech, obviously including the freedom of the press. This is so fundamentally important because it is the freedom of speech that exposes corruption and abuses, and you need that to make democracy work, because if you don't know what's going on, how can you vote about it? And this is tied in with the conservative belief that society is built up from the individual. And it makes a more prosperous society because the individual spends his or her money better than the state can spend it for him. Why do I say that? Well, when you spend your money, you decide what's the interest of you and your family. When the state does it, it has to go through a whole complex process to ensure that it isn't being spent improperly. And that creates massive inefficiencies, and it's spent not necessarily for good investment reasons, but for political reasons. And the state is competitive with the individual, and competitive with that first building block, the family. The state has always worried that the family is something that is as strong as it is, and therefore looks to control it, particularly the socialist state. That has always been the worry for those of us who think that the individual counts and that we need strong families as well. So that's what we were talking about this morning at Legatum. We were talking about how you create this prosperous state built on individuals working for themselves and for their families. The Adam Smith view that the baker doesn't bake bread out of the goodness of his heart, but to make money, but that the bread he sells makes you better off, more comfortable, feeds you, feeds your family, and that these basic principles are what this conference needs to make us an even more successful nation, and to have a clear distinction between us and the controlling, overriding, bossy, nannying socialist.